Hello, everyone. We are so pleased to have you here with us today. We welcome you to our next session of PDOs. We remind you to please remain muted and with your video off. If you have any questions, please type them on the chat box and we will answer them at the end of the session, okay? Remember that this session will be recorded and available on our YouTube channel, EducationUSA Mexico. And also English closed captions are available for you. I'm gonna start, remember that our today's session, the topic is getting your US student visa and maintaining your status as part of the pre-departure orientation series. I'm going to start very briefly talking about what is Education USA. It's a global network of advising centers from the US State Department. So we belong or we are part of the US government, meaning we do not represent specific universities. We provide accurate, comprehensive, and current information about the full range of accredited US higher education institutions and free access to introductory information on US studies. And remember that we have 5 steps. This is part of our 5 steps, the pre-departure orientation. And today we're gonna focus on your visa, your student visa, okay? So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Ryan Geiger, Northeast region. Sorry?
Annie, let me interrupt you because we have Jacob here.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan.
I'm gonna go back. Okay, so we're gonna start with Jacob McClelland. He's vice consul from the US Embassy, and he will talk about the US student visas. Thank you very much, Jacob. The floor is yours. You are gonna present, right? So should I stop presenting?
Yes, if you could start presenting, that'd be great. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. Do you guys have control of the PowerPoint presentation that I sent earlier?
I can do that. Just give me.
Wonderful. All right, well, I will wait until you guys can pull that up, but I'll just kind of introduce myself briefly. My name is Jacob McClelland. I am a vice consul in Mexico City. I've been here for about 6 months, and before that, I worked in Tel Aviv, Israel, as a vice consul as well. And I come to the State Department from a little bit of a different path. I was a journalist before I was a diplomat. I worked for public radio stations for about 15 years with NPR before I joined the State Department about 3 years ago. And I'm here in Mexico City with my wife and my 2 kids, and of course my cat, who will almost certainly want to make an introduction by herself during the course of this presentation, because she really loves to do that. But we are not here to talk about my cat today. Of course, we are here to talk about student visas. And if we can go ahead, we can move on to the next slide. So what is a visa? So the definition of a visa is that it's a legal document to request entry into a foreign country like the United States. It doesn't guarantee entry into the US though. A Customs and Border Patrol officer at the port of entry will determine who can enter and for how long. A visa is really just kind of like a permission to knock on the door. It's Customs and Border Patrol. They're the ones who decide if you'll be let in. So, and another thing that's important to keep in mind is that we always advise applicants to never buy airplane tickets until they have that visa in hand. Next slide, please. All right, so there are 3 types of student visas. There's the F, an M, and a J. And there's a little bit of difference between these visa classes, right? So an F visa is one that if you're going to go study at the University of Oklahoma and study psychology for 4 years, if you're doing a full academic program like that, that's the type of visa that you're going to do, or that you'll need. It's for undergraduate, graduate, and doctorate programs. And it's also if you're going to take English classes even if it's only for a couple of weeks or months. If you're doing an English program, you'll need that F type of visa. There's also the M visa, which isn't necessarily an academic program. That's more like if you're going to go take flight classes to learn how to become a pilot, or if you're doing another type of technical program, that's when you'll need that M visa. And in a lot of ways, it's pretty similar to the F, but it's really just kind of, the type of program that you'll be gaining academic credit for. And then there's the J visa, which is a totally different type. And this one is for people who are going to a university to work as a research scholar or as a visiting scholar. You can also use a J visa if you're a university student and you're going on a summer work and travel program. Perhaps you're going to go to an American summer camp and work as a camp counselor, or you're going to be doing an internship, working for an advertising agency in New York. All of those types of things would require you to travel on a J visa. It's also for if you're going to the United States in some sort of training capacity. So you can also study with a tourist visa, but it's like really kind of specific in what you can do on a tourist visa if you're going to study. Really, it's only if the course is recreational or incidental to a tourist trip, and you're not going to be gaining academic credit or professional certification while you're in the United States. So it's much more restricted with what you can study if you're on a tourist visa. Spouses and children under the age of 21 can apply for a dependent visa. So if you're a student going on an F visa, your spouse would be an F2, and they'd be linked to your visa. So as long as the student has the status in the US, the F2 can accompany him or her. Now, if you're a student on an F1 visa and you lose status, the F2 will also lose status and will also need to leave the country. Each applicant must complete the application process. The only difference is that the F2 doesn't pay the SEVIS fee, but rather use the F1 SEVIS number for the F2 visa. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We can go on to the next slide now. All right, so students should enroll in the institution and ask that the institution issue either a Form I-20 or DS 2019, depending on the type of visa, and you'll need to bring those to your interview at the embassy or the consulate. Next slide, please. There's no restrictions for traveling with a Mexican passport with less than 6 months of validity. So if you only have a couple months left on your Mexican passport before it expires, you could still get a visa inside that passport. The important thing, though, is that the passport remains valid when leaving the United States. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm quickly going to walk through the step-by-step process for applying for a student visa. And it's important to select the correct place where the interview is going to take place. Because in Mexico, there are 10 possible options of where you can go for the interview. And as you can see in this top right-hand corner, you can change the language, just hover over that and you can change it to English or Spanish. And when you hover over the questions on the DS-160, a translation will appear as well. Next slide, please. All right, so you must present the confirmation page and a valid passport when you go to the CAS and to the embassy or to the consulate. You don't need to submit a photo with your application. the photo and the biometrics will be taking place at the applicant service center, or the CAS, the first place that you're going to go in this process. Next slide. All right, so visit this site to create an account. This is the address, and here you'll select a payment method and how you would like to receive your passport back. And you have a couple of options there. You can have it delivered through DHL, or you can pick it up at the ACS or the CAS. It's kind of interchangeable, ACS and CAS. It means the same thing. Next slide. Payments must be made in cash at any Citibanamex or Scotia Bank in Mexico. And it is really, really important that you make those payments in person. They have to be made in person at any Citibanamex or Scotia Bank in Mexico. Next slide. All right, so step 4, you need to schedule 2 appointments. One will be at the ASC for fingerprints and photo collection, and the other one will be at the embassy or one of the consulates spread around Mexico. It's possible to request an emergency appointment for student visas. There is an option in the online appointment scheduling site to request it. Post in Mexico tend to honor these requests to ensure that students arrive to their academic programs on time. Next slide, please. All right, so you've already made your appointment. And so the next step will be to pay the SEVIS fee. Students should pay this additional fee before the interview. Otherwise, their visa process will be delayed. Now, this is a separate fee from the visa application fee. And as I said before, make sure you pay that. Make sure you pay that fee before you come to the interview. And you can see a link to it here on this slide. And I'll just kind of give you a second to maybe screenshot it or write down that URL to make sure that you have the right address to make that SEVIS fee. All right, next slide. Okay, and lastly, students should attend, obviously, their scheduled appointments at the ASC and at the embassy. The one in Mexico City, for instance, the ASC in Mexico City is at Hamburgo 230 or 213, and of course at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the day of the interview. One of the biggest questions that we always receive is about documentation. So really, the only required documents for student visas are the DS-160 confirmation page. That's the one with the little bar that gets scanned on it. You also need to bring a valid passport. You need to bring the visa fee receipt, the I-20 or the DS 2019 form, whichever form it is that you have for your visa application, and your SEVIS receipt as well. Additional documents that an applicant may choose to bring are proof of financial ability to pay for expenses, proof of academic qualifications, and documents that prove ties with Mexico. We hold each applicant to the same credible student standard because we want to ensure that they have a plan to study and how to pay for the program, and that they intend to return to the country of their residence, to Mexico, after a temporary stay in the US. Keep in mind that consular sections can't issue student visas more than 120 days in advance of the program. Next slide, please. Okay, hold on. So yeah, as I mentioned before, you might want to bring like some additional documents that you can bring, but you may not necessarily, that may not be asked, is that proof of financial ability to pay, proof of academic qualifications, and the documents that prove ties with Mexico. Next slide, please. All right, so when to travel? This is a big question that we often receive. Basically, you can if a student can travel 30 days before the start date of the program on the I-20 or the DS 2019. You'll see those dates on those forms. You can travel 30 days before the start of the program, basically, as listed on those forms on your student visa. If a student wants to travel before that, he or she will need to apply for a tourist visa. However, this can complicate the visit, as the applicant will have to change their immigration status while in the United States. So that can start to get kind of tricky. Next slide, please. Okay, so how long can you stay? F visas may stay in the United States up to 60 days after the end of the program, as indicated on their form I-20. It's different though for the M's and the J's. They can stay in the US for up to 30 days after the end of the program, as indicated on the I-20 or their DS 2019, the form that they have. The student must leave the United States before the day indicated on the I-94. The I-94 is the entry and exit card issued by immigration officials upon entry into the country. And again, Customs and Border Patrol, they have the final say about admissions to the US. Remember that the visa is really just the permission to knock on the door, and Customs and Border Patrol decides if they're going to let you in. Next slide, please. All right, so it's really important that students are responsible for the information on their application, and honesty is always the best policy. I'm not gonna dwell on this too much, but there are consequences for fraud, which can include investigation, visa denial, even ineligibility to receive a visa in the future, and even possible legal consequences. Keep in mind, for Mexican citizens, there are no additional charges to the visa process. The process at ASC and DHL are included within the cost. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a big one, and it's all about COVID. And keep in mind, before I say anything, that COVID requirements change all the time. So anything that I say right now, between now and the time you travel, this information could change. To get the most current COVID travel requirement information, please go to the CDC website at cdc.gov/coronavirus. And that's where you'll find the most up-to-date information about travel at the time that you're going to travel. So bear that in mind as I say this next part, which is that currently travelers no longer need to present a negative COVID test in order to enter the US. That's no longer a requirement to enter the US. But as these things change over time, that may change again. We don't know. Also keep in mind that we do have a vaccination requirement to enter the US. Foreign national air travelers to the US will be required to be fully vaccinated. They must provide proof of vaccination status prior to boarding an airplane, with only limited exceptions. Okay? All right, next slide, please. And if you need any additional information, please check out any of these sites, including the US Embassy website, which has a wealth of information about applying for student visas to come study in the United States. And there's also several other links here on this page that can help you if you have any questions. All right, next slide, please. All right. So a couple of common questions that we often receive. If I have a valid US visa in my old passport, do I transport the visa to my new passport? So you can't transfer visas to new passports, and you don't necessarily have to apply for a new visa. You can normally apply to enter the US with both passports. which would be an old passport with a valid visa and a new passport without a visa. You can travel with both. Just make sure the visa is intact and it's not damaged. And if you really want your visa inside your valid passport, then you must apply for a visa again, and go through the normal procedures as if it were a renewal. And another super common question, is English a requirement to apply for a student visa? And surprisingly, not necessarily, especially if you intend to take an English course in the United States, or if you're going to an academic course where the school will provide training in English prior to the start of the course. Other programs, such as exchange programs, for example, already require a certain level of English. A student must demonstrate English language proficiency only if an admitting institution has made English language ability a requirement for the intended course of study. And after answering that question, if anybody else has any other questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Jacob. That was information very, very useful for our students. George, can you please stop sharing so I can share my presentation? And I don't know if anyone has any questions. Should we leave them at the end of the session, of the entire session? Mabel?
Hi, thank you. I think we can, I have only one question. I think we can go over that now.
Okay.
So, Jacob, someone is already at the US. She is currently holding a J1 visa because she's there as an au pair, but she wants to get into master's, a master's degree. So she's wondering if she can change her status while she is there in the US.
That is, frankly, I do not know the answer to that question. I can check with some. I mean, I would check the website, the U.S. Embassy website, or we can have Ryan answer that question, as he has so graciously offered. Because I wouldn't be able to give a good, honest answer about that right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if Ryan, would you like to? Do you have any information regarding that aspect of changing your status?
Yes, absolutely. So there's two types of changing visa status or changing your status. One is through consular processing, which is what Jacob has just talked about, where you go to the U.S. Embassy or consulate in your country. The other is if you're already in the United States and you hold a status that is not F, M, or J for study purposes, you can apply for a change of status in the United States. The process, however, is slightly different. It is an application through United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. There is a fee associated with that. And what we are seeing at Penn State University is that there is an application processing time for a change of status from anywhere between 9 and 14 months. And you must maintain the current status that you're in, which I believe the question was asked. They said that they were in J status as an au pair before they can begin following the regulations of the new status that they're in. So the quick answer to your question is, if you are in the United States, yes, you can apply for a change of status. However, it is a much more lengthy and timelier process than if you were to perhaps travel back home to Mexico, which is another option. Another piece of advice that we tell our students is that even if they do apply for a change of status, There is not an automatic guarantee that that change of status application will be approved. And if the change of status application is not approved, then you will not have any other option than to return home and apply for your designated visa through consular processing.
Okay, thank you very much for that information, Ryan. Well,
thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Anna, but we are receiving more questions, 2 more, and thank you very much, Ryan, for that. Jacob, we have a person that says that she already started a tourist visa process, but she's expected to be accepted in a master program. So she's wondering if she can continue with the 2 processes at the same time, or should she what has to be done?
She can continue with both applications concurrently, and apply for both the tourist visa and the student visa at the same time. Yes, and it's perfectly fine to hold 2 different visas as long as they're two different types of visas at the same time. You can have a B1, B2 tourist visa as well as a J or an F visa, and they can both be valid at once.
Okay, and 2 more questions, super quick questions. The other one is regarding how many hours can a student work under a student visa in the US?
That there's not, I don't want to, I believe it's 20 hours, but I don't want to give a, let me get back to you on that. I believe it's 20 hours, but I'm not entirely sure.
Mabel, do you have more questions?
Yes, 1 more. Just for your knowledge, Ryan will talk about employment while you are in the US. So if you can wait a few more minutes, you will also get information from Brian. So those were basically the questions. I have more, but you already answered those during the presentation, Jacob. So thank you very much for that.
Great, well, thank you very much.
Okay, so now it is my pleasure to introduce you to Ryan Geiger. He's the Northeast Region International Student Advisor and Global Engagement Coordinator at Penn State University. Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me, Anna. It's always a pleasure to work with my colleagues in EducationUSA. And I've actually had an opportunity to visit Mexico many times, not just Mexico City, but several cities throughout Mexico, visiting schools and meeting with students and their prospective families. So when EducationUSA asked me to, if I would be willing to participate, without a hesitation, I said, absolutely. So thank you very much for having me. My presentation is going to talk about things that you can talk with an International Student Advisor or the International Student Services Office on your campus. And then we're going to talk about how to maintain your immigration status. So a lot of times international students, when they come to the United States, they look at the International Student Advising Office simply as an immigration advising office. And yes, that is a core portion of what we do. However, we are not just technical immigration advisors. We are education professionals as well. In addition to managing your immigration records, some of us teach and do other things. So we can answer a variety of questions that relate to your education, including immigration. So if you have questions about immigration, your I-20 or DS 2019 or your visa, we can answer those. Every university is a little bit different in the United States, and they may have different enrollment requirements based on what is determined as full-time at that campus. So we can talk with you about enrollment and answer any questions that you have. If you have questions about employment, we're happy to answer those, to talk about on-campus employment or how to get employment authorization so you can engage in off-campus employment, which we'll talk about later. If you have academic issues or questions about your academic plans, we can help you with that. If you are experiencing any challenges with adjusting to your new culture, the United States is very, very different from state to state. It's a very large country, and there's a lot of different areas in between New York, Miami, and Los Angeles. So you may encounter things that you have never seen before, and we want to help you understand that. All international students are required to have mandatory medical insurance, and we can answer your questions about that. If you have any questions about updating your addresses while you're in the United States, we can help you with that. If you encounter any financial issues or concerns, we can assist you with that, whether it's navigating how to pay your bill, whether it's updating financial information on your I-20 or DS 2019, or if you're looking for other types of financial aid assistance, we can help you with that. You may want to come to your respective school and obtain a driver's license so you can have some independence and be the most popular student in your friend group because you will have access to a vehicle and can drive. If you want to get a driver's license, the International Student Services Office can help you with that. If you want to apply for a Social Security number, which is a tax identification number that you would be eligible for once you have an on-campus job, we can help you apply for that. If you have questions about traveling, whether that's traveling inside the United States or traveling outside the United States and then re-entering, we can help you with that. Most of you will come to the United States planning to study and not have to take a break in your studies. However, these last 2 years have taught us that sometimes our plans can change because of things beyond our control, such as COVID. And we've had a number of students that have had to take a leave of absence, and we've helped them through that process so that they could properly leave the United States without any negative consequences to their immigration record, and then be able to re-enroll and eventually re-enter the United States. If you want to do a change of level, we can assist you with that. That's where you would change from an associate's to a bachelor's to a master's, or a master's to a doctoral level of study. And we can also help you with a change of status. Many of you will come to the United States in FM or J status, but depending on what your goals are or what opportunities arise in between the 2 and 4 years of your studies, you may want to do a different status in the United States. And we can advise you on those different processes. These are just a few of the things that you can talk with us about, but really most international student advisors and international student services offices are here to ultimately contribute to your success. So if you have a question and you never know who to turn to, always look at the international office as your one-stop place that if you have a question, you can ask it. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk about maintaining your immigration status while you're inside the United States. And I say F1 here, but these rules also apply to students that are in M1 and J1 status. There are 3 main rules that you must follow to maintain your immigration status while you are in the United States. You must enroll full-time. You must update your addresses. and you must follow employment rules. Next slide, please. Full-time enrollment. You are required to enroll full-time. At most universities, this would be 12 credits or units of study at the undergraduate level. For most universities, it would be 9 credits of graduate study. Some graduate programs may be different, such as law or medicine, and the full-time enrollment may be different than if you are in a traditional arts, humanities, sciences, or engineering graduate program. You are required to enroll full-time during the fall and spring semester. The summer semester, or summer quarter, depending on how your school's academic calendar is designed, is considered the annual vacation period. And you do not have to enroll during the summer unless it is your first or your final semester of study. While you're in the United States, the government expects you to have a physical presence. Many universities in the United States have begun to offer more courses online and through hybrid instruction. And you can enroll in online courses, but only one course of no more than 3 credits can count towards your full-time enrollment. Some students ask me, how many online courses can I take? And the government does not have an official answer on the maximum number that you can take. But if you take more than 1 online course, only one of them will count towards your full-time enrollment for maintaining your status. And it's very important to know that not being enrolled full-time is a violation of your immigration status. Next slide, please. There are some exceptions for a reduced course load if you are not able to enroll full-time. Maybe you're having some initial difficulty with the English language. Maybe you're not familiar with university teaching methods in the United States because they're different from what you have, the way schools are taught in Mexico. Maybe it's towards the end of your program and you don't have, you only need 1 or 2 courses, and you don't need to enroll full-time just to maintain your status if it's the final semester. If something comes up that you don't think you're going to be able to enroll full-time, talk to your international student advisor before dropping a class or dropping below full-time enrollment. Withdrawing from a course in the middle of the semester or doing a retroactive withdrawal is a violation of your immigration status. Next slide, please. You are required to update your addresses. You are required to update your CVIS US, that is your local address, while you're in the United States. It could be on-campus housing, or maybe you have an apartment off campus. Basically, I tell students, wherever you sleep when you go home from classes at the end of the day, that's your CVIS US address. A lot of Penn State campuses are close to major cities like New York and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. And I've had students say, oh, Ryan, I'm going to New York for the weekend. Do I have to update my address? If you're going somewhere for a temporary stay of just a few days, you do not have to update your address because your intent is to go back to that primary destination, which is near or on campus. And you can maintain that as your CVIS US address. You are also required to update your CVIS foreign address. This is the address where you live when you are outside the United States. Anytime your address changes, you are required to update it within 10 days. And every school is a little bit different. Some schools will have an automated student self-services management system that you can do it yourself. Some you may have to go to the International Student Advising Office. If you have questions, ask your International Student Advisor. And it's important to note that not updating your addresses is a violation of your immigration status. Next slide, please. You must follow employment guidelines. F1, M1, and J1 students are only allowed to work on campus. F1 and M1 students do not need permission prior to accepting on-campus employment. However, J1 students do need permission from the International Student Services Office before you can begin working on campus. You are limited to only being allowed to work up to 20 hours while school is in session. However, you may work up to 40 hours during breaks in the semester. That includes the fall break, perhaps the Thanksgiving break, the winter break between semester, the fall and spring semester, or even spring break. 40 hours is the maximum that the US government has. However, universities may have a cap that is slightly lower than 40 hours. If you have any questions, always check with the International Student Services Office at your specific campus. And as I mentioned, F1 students do not need permission before accepting on-campus employment. However, all students, including F1, M1, and J1 students, do need permission from International Student and Scholar Advising Offices or United States in Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, before working off campus. Working off campus without permission is a serious violation of your immigration status. It's one of the most awful things that you can do by breaking the rules when you're in the United States. So please do not engage in off-campus employment. If you have questions about what off-campus employment is or may be, please go talk with your International Student Services Office, and they will be happy to help you. Next slide, please. We recommend that you safeguard your immigration documents. This includes your passport, your visa, and your I-20. Keep these documents in a safe, secure place. Never throw away your old I-20s or DS-2019s. And we recommend that you save electronic copies of your documents. Contact International Student Services Office and Campus Police if your documents are ever lost or stolen. And one point that is not on this slide, but we do see this come up every once in a while, is from time to time, the United States government will announce a change in fees for certain services for international students. While those are legitimate updates, sometimes individuals try to take advantage of international students and will acquire your contact phone number and will call you pretending to be an agent or a representative from the government and will demand money or copies of your immigration documents. Let me tell you that the government will never call and demand money over the phone. And it is highly unlikely that they will call and demand a copy of your immigration documents. In most cases, the US government has the ability to obtain copies of these documents. If anybody does call you on the phone, I recommend that you ask for their name, their agent ID number, the agency that they are calling on behalf, and ask for the phone number to call them back at. Take all of that information to your International Student Services Office and call the individual back with your International Student Advisor present. Next slide, please. Every college or university is a little bit different. I've worked at 4 different universities over the last 10 years. And while immigration regulations are the same through the federal government, the way the schools interpret the rules may differ. So if you have any questions, you may contact me directly at my Penn State email address, and I can try my best to give you general information or links to helpful resources such as Study in the States or Education USA or the State Department, where you can find official answers to questions, even if you're not a student that's coming to Penn State. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Mabel, I don't know if we have questions from the audience.
Hello, yes, I'm gonna be asking you some questions that we're getting from our audience, Ryan. One of the questions is about updating the service address. This student wants to know if the process is done online or in person.
In most cases, you will update your address through a student portal on your campus. Some campuses are small, though. Some campuses are very large, like Penn State. So at Penn State, we have a system where you update your address online, and then everything filters through software that updates your student information portal. It updates your CVIS record, because we have almost 10,000 students enrolled, international students enrolled, and then another 2,000 on optional practical training, whose records we manage. A smaller school, however, they may have a manual process for updating your address in CVIS. So just check with the International Student Advising Office on what the specific procedure is at your specific college or university.
Okay, thank you. Well, here they say that that if we consider that there is a 10-day time limit to do the process, how do you recommend that they start? I mean, how early do you recommend that they start to do this kind of update?
Are they asking about how early I recommend entering the United States before the start of their program?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So as Jacob mentioned earlier, you cannot enter the United States on your FM or J visa more than 30 days prior to the program start date listed on your I-20. Maybe if you're a graduate student and you're coming with a spouse or children, you might need some extra time to get into the United States, get settled into some accommodations. If your children are of age where they're required to attend school, helping get them registered for school and things like that. So you may want to choose to come earlier. In most cases, your school will tell you what the program's start date is on your I-20, but then they will tell you what specific date to enter the United States so that you can participate in an in-person international student orientation or campus welcome. So for example, at Penn State University, our program start date for this fall semester on all of our I-20s and DS 2019s is Sunday, August 21st. Classes begin on August 22nd, but we are planning on students having an international student orientation, needing to plan to travel to arrive, adjust to jet lag, get settled into their accommodation, and so on. Plus, we like to have some fun activities for you to get to know campus and the other new students. So we are asking our international students that even though the program start date on their I-20 is listed as August 21, we are asking them to arrive by August 15 so that they can get to campus and register and participate in international student orientation. Ultimately, you can make the decision that's best for you. Are you traveling by yourself? Are you traveling with family? Take those things into consideration when trying to determine the date in which you are going to enter the United States.
Thank you very much for that. Well, just in case that something happens, that maybe their visa arrives late and they miss this orientation session, how could they get this information? Is there a way that they go only on their own to the consular, or what will be the process in that case?
if you're not able to arrive in the United States by your school's designated start date for international student orientation, that can happen from time to time. Maybe there's a delay in your visa processing, or through no control of your own, you weren't able to get a visa appointment before the start date. Two things to remember. One, you can request an emergency visa appointment for a student visa, and every country and every consulate is different. But we have not been hearing anything about any delays in consular processing at any of at the U.S. Embassy or consulates in Mexico at this time. But if something does happen when you are applying for your application, and the DS-160 software doesn't have an appointment slot available before the start of your program, we are advising students select whatever appointment is available. Maybe it's in October after the semester begins. Maybe it's in January of 2023. Select that appointment and then contact the embassy and request an emergency visa appointment and indicate the start date of your program at your intended university. And most embassies and consulates around the world are doing their best to accommodate for emergency visa appointments so that you can arrive at the school before the start of your program. However, if that does not happen, many schools, such as Penn State, are offering a makeup orientation session for students that arrive late. One thing that Penn State does not allow you to do is arrive after the start of classes. That may seem harsh, but really it's for your best interests academically. What we see is when a student arrives late after the start of classes, they have to adjust to their new environment, they have to get settled, and they have to take classes, and they have to catch up on work that they may have already missed. That's not a great foundation to be successful during your first semester of study in the United States. And we tell students, take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. Are you looking at a short-term goal, which is to get to the United States? Or are you looking at your longer-term goals, which are get to the United States, get to your college, have a great academic and social experience, and obtain your degree? When you rush the process to get to the United States, that's when you start to see things arise, such as academic problems or social cultural adjustment problems arise. There will be delays in the process, but don't try to rush the process just to get to an end goal.
Thank you for that, Ryan. And yeah, that's very important. Look for the long-term goal instead of the rush at the very beginning. Well, I just have another question. This student is asking, if I have an emergency at my home country, whom should I let know? Or if I leave the country in a rush, will that be considered as a violation of the status?
That's a really great question. International students that come to the United States encounter some things that domestic students don't have. First and foremost, you often don't have immediate family members in the United States that can help you. So you adopt or have a chosen family or friend network, but you have your family back home where you may have responsibilities for taking care of your parents or grandparents or children that you may leave back at home. I often say life happens for good or for bad. And if something happens that you need to return home, please do your best to talk with your International Student Advising Office. You will need a travel revalidation signature on page 2 of your I-20 or the bottom of your DS 2019. but and it's ideal to get that signature before you leave the United States. However, you know, if an emergency arises and you're thinking about your family and making travel arrangements to get home and you forget to get a travel signature, there is a process back in place at many schools or universities to obtain a travel signature. The important thing to know is if you leave the United States without a revalidation or reentry signature, you will not be able to return to the United States until you have one of those. A slight spin-off to this question is immigration can be complex, but everything is a lot more easily navigable and easy to understand if you plan ahead, if you communicate ahead. It's when you start to take actions without having all of the information or make rush decisions and then come to your international office and say, well, I did this or I did that. What can I do now? So in some cases, your options may be limited because of the actions you have chosen to take. So whenever you can plan ahead, always, always, always do so. In terms of managing your immigration and your academic career, there is no such thing as planning too far in advance. Things may change based on you know, what's happening in the world or immigration policy in the United States, but asking questions ahead is always a good thing. Planning ahead is always a good thing.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Those were all of the questions that I had. And well, Anna, we're back to you.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you very much, Jacob, too, for your presentation. That is the end of the session. And for all of you watching us, you are more than welcome to keep joining our sessions. We have a series of pre-departure orientations that you can see on the screen, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you so much to all of you, and see you next time.